Suburbia is where the majority of Americans live and the vast majority of journalists don't know exist. If you're going to talk about the condition in which people live, you have to talk about the suburbs.
After World War II and for many years after that, we have seen a huge growth in suburban development all across America. A lot of it was crap. Reston was a groundbreaker. One of the pioneers in showing that you could do it and do it well.
What was exciting about the period of Reston is that we wanted to build a better America. We had big ideas.
Simon was an endless talker of his idea, his dream. I mean, this was his legacy. He wanted to be remembered by posterity, having built the most beautiful new town in America.
We were looking for a home, and we toured over at least 100 homes. We kind of found this one last minute.
It's a beautiful day, green space, and it led us to the lake.
And we just stood there like, could we?
We could live here.
We could live here, right? This is
That's
amazing.
what you said.
So it's recording, right?
Yeah.
Haha, cool.
I think that the architecture is really cool. All the neighbors have just something slightly different. It's not uniform, but it all flows really beautifully. I think it has a very unique feel. I've never seen anything like it. You spend a lot more time outdoors, actually enjoying the experience of going for a walk. I could walk to the Lake Island Plaza.
Cafes, restaurants,
Exactly.
It's all right there laid out for you.
When we first moved in, within the first week, we got a pot of flowers.
Yeah, and the same when we had our baby, our neighbors dropped off things, you know, every day
Books
for a little while.
It was clothing.
We're not able to really walk very far without bumping into somebody and stopping to talk to them.
I didn't really consider community, but now that I have it, it's really important. And it turns out that this place was designed by Bob Simon. And you've met him a couple times.
I did meet Bob Simon once last year, I think. I sat on a bench with him. He's right.
It's cool, man. I mean, is he 100 this year?
Yeah.
He's 100 this year, and he's still walking around.
At one extreme, you have the hermit, and he gets his kicks out of solitude. I see your shadow. I'm anti-hermit. I get my kicks out of people. Good morning. Children, relatives, neighbors, that's where you get happiness.
I'm here because of you. I studied planning when I was in graduate school.
Oh.
If you look at Robert Simon's goals for Reston, they were all about people. It was all about developing a community that would put people's needs first. When we think about the great places around the country or around the world, oftentimes it comes back to someone like that. It comes down to a singular vision, a domineering ego, and the willingness to push something through.
The major single thought was wanting to make it possible to have a real community.
I first heard about Reston in 1960-61. We lived in New York City, and I don't think anybody had been to Virginia. And he would describe to us this town that he was going to build. And we would look at him like he was a little crazy.
The property was so attractive, half woods and half open field. And the location between the airport to be and the District of Columbia was fabulous. And the price was certainly right, $1,500 an acre. The opportunity was terrific, so why not put the two together? And obviously it was too big for a shopping center. What could it be other than a whole town?
It was putting a town or city in the middle of a field. The first significant decision to put anything out in the area was Dulles Airport, and nothing else for about another 15 miles on either direction. People really didn't know how to take him. Was he serious? Did this man believe that he could build a field of dreams and they would come?
I got out a yellow pad. I started to put on that yellow pad everything that I had experienced or knew about that would make life fun, more rewarding, more bearable. Whatever should go into a community, into a town, into a city.
Bob grew up in an apartment that was in New York City, but it was across the street from a park, a very large park next to the river.
It was beautiful, nature, trees, and it was very walkable. There were no cars down there. We loved our open spaces. My father's business was real estate, acquiring key intersection spots in Manhattan, opposite Bloomingdale, opposite Macy, that kind of thing. In 1925, my father went to Mrs. Carnegie, and between the two of them, they arranged for him to buy Carnegie Hall. My mother was a culture vulture, and she felt it her obligation to see that none of the seats for Box 23 in Carnegie Hall were ever empty. We traveled a lot. We went on the grand tours, what they called it. 15 months in Europe.
The aesthetics of things were important from his childhood. When they traveled, the arts and visiting museums, that's where they grew up.
When I graduated from college, I spent 2 months on a bicycle riding all over Europe and found that's the only way to travel because you meet so many people. The Italian hill towns were my great inspiration. Very dense little villages surrounding a plaza. That's the way you do it when you want to bring people close together. I consider those plazas the community glue. And of course, they're not just in Italian hill towns, they're all over Europe. While I was in France, I got a cable that my father had died. I was made president of Carnegie Hall, age 23. There were the corridors where the sounds flowed out from the music studios and the young women were doing their pliés. Studio 61 was where Oklahoma was staged, and all the cast came there every day as they staged it. Some of them actually lived there. This was a community of artists.
which tied in directly to the concepts that I had for community being what development was all about.
Bob's vision for Reston was pretty clear. He wanted it to be a major change from the way development was happening so far in this country, and he was very vocal about that. We were talking about building something that was not just a building project, but a whole new way of living.
For a long time, the suburbs were seen as exclusively single-family detached houses with rows and rows of the same kind of cookie-cutter houses. We couldn't get out of that box. That was what our notion of the suburbs was.
In the 50s and 60s, people went to the suburbs to have their own backyards and their own front yards. There was really no sense of a town center in a lot of those places. They were just all these houses, and you went out to the strip mall to buy something or to shop.
Zoning is a very blunt instrument for most of the 20th century. It was exclusive zones with single uses.
The whole concept of zoning is, let's have a zone of one given use, stores, factories, houses, and they had nothing to do with each other, They were built miles apart.
Everybody was buying cars. The future seemed limitless. But I think we were also just beginning to see that there was a price to be paid for it. A sense of alienation, disconnection, a sense of not really feeling part of a community. Bob Simon said, "I bet we can do it a better way."
The demands of the modern age require new concepts in the development of new communities. One of the principal goals for Reston is to build a balanced community that can help meet the human requirements of our civilization. Reston is divided roughly into 7 villages of 10,000 persons each. These areas will have housing for a wide range of income groups and age groups. The Reston plan calls for higher density housing types, arranged in a new pattern. The cluster housing technique will make possible additional open space as an integral part of neighborhood life. The most important shopping area will constitute the town center that will give vitality and strength to the new community. The goal is a full life centered around neighborhood living, working, and recreational opportunities.
It was a very visionary moment. Both the physical notion of density and the idea of a diverse, open, heterogeneous community are both fundamentally urban ideas. And what Bob Simon was trying to do in Reston was take the best ideas of the city and say they can also work in a suburban context.
A lot of people have said that Mr. Simon came down and presented wild ideas. Virginia has always backed her way into the centuries ahead. So yes, they were something different that Virginians normally would have encountered.
We wanted to have mixed use, and this was scheduled under zoning, to be all single-family houses, 4,000 of them or whatever it was to be in this area.
We started out trying to amend the local zoning ordinance. We really wasn't getting anywhere. And once the plan was there, then the county saw, hey, here's a chance to do something completely innovative and different than's ever been done before. Let's see if we can, instead of amending all of these old ordinances, write a new ordinance that would permit these things.
That was the clue to really this urban environment within a rural setting of Virginia. And American zoning then changed as a result of this.
What Reston taught us was that a more flexible and performance-oriented approach to zoning was much more appropriate and could produce places that were more human.
We began to work on a portion of Reston that he expected to start soonest, which was the area around Lake Ann Village.
Each village was to have a village center. Each center had a different architectural concept. Some of them were to be hilltop towns, one was to be around a lake edge, but they all certainly had a common thing, and that is a common plaza. Plazas exist in Italian villages, but also we remember that in early American towns, they built villages that had a center. They had a green space, they had a town hall, and these kind of central elements, they constituted a community, really.
I tried to visualize what the village center would be like. In the distance was the 16-story tower, and around it is the plaza, housing of different types, some for families, some for single people. There are shops. There are offices, there's a church, in a built environment that has all these things mixed up together.
That was a meeting place. You had to walk, you had to interact with people. This is where you flirt with your boyfriend or you meet your parents.
I think the Lake Ann Village Center was a kind of model of what a village center should be like.
We started building townhouses, apartments, a village center. That's the way you do it when you want to bring people close together. We instructed the architects to have different sizes of units so that there could be different income people living close together. That also made it possible to stay in the same area for all of your life if you wanted to. The consideration of beauty of art was paramount. It seemed to me that any development should have fun, beauty, fantasy.
It was exciting because it was a whole new game. And it was a crapshoot. We knew it was a crapshoot right from the beginning as we were doing it.
I don't know if Bob saw the development of Reston as a risk. I think the passion was driving him, but it was a risk. Some bankers thought it odd, at least, that he was trying to put townhouses in suburbia. That hadn't happened at that point, and some were concerned about mixed-use zoning.
Let's take ourselves back to 1964. There were no fair housing laws. We were still living in very, very segregated neighborhoods.
Virginia was very much a Confederate state. I mean, you saw this historically with massive resistance.
There will be no enforced integration in Virginia.
The government in Virginia found an alternative to integrating their public school systems. They simply shut them down.
We were the very, very first community in Virginia to announce, hey, we're an open community, everybody come on.
The idea of community means people of all incomes, races, living happily together. It was inconceivable that we would do anything other than inclusiveness.
This was also quite a big ripple in the fabric of what was then a very conservative Northern Virginia.
We were turned down by 50 different banks looking for normal construction loans. They were not interested in talking to us.
The most difficult thing about large-scale mixed-use properties is they're capital intensive in their early years when you don't have any money coming in, and you can't do it with borrowed money. You can't pay the interest.
We had to somehow get money from some major source other than a conventional lending institution.
There was a period in the middle part of the 20th century where many of the large projects were driven by either oil companies or other major industrial companies. Now, the advantage of that was that they had staying power. They had capital.
Gulf did provide the financing that we needed to continue construction.
Bob's concept was, in order to make this successful, we had to show from the very beginning the whole concept of what it's like.
We thought that the first residents should have all the opportunities there rather than promises. And you build the facilities and people will come. We had an art gallery, a community center. There was a swimming pool. There was a golf course, tennis courts. There was the beginning of the network of walking trails.
I think he was thinking what he would like if he were living here. It's enjoying all the possibilities that life has to offer.
We all came to the official opening of Reston, and I thought it was fantastic. It was so beautiful. I wanted to live here.
What Simon got is that when you were building a suburb, you weren't building a bedroom, you were building a community. And that was a thing that had been missing in suburban development.
It set a standard for this kind of development all over the country.
The 1960s were a very optimistic time, and I think that's a piece of what was driving Bob, an optimism that life can be better. We can improve the way things are done.
The publicity we got was so incredible. There were literally people who packed up and came here like early pioneers.
Toddled here from Chicago in a '64 Chevrolet with 4 children in the car and myself, and everybody said, don't do it, you have no friends. I said, I have friends everywhere. And I had my faith, had my 4 children, and I knew it was going to be a better life for me.
I got absolutely fascinated. I said, this is just the way I want to live my life in a community like that.
I grew up in New York City where the whole world was mine. Getting on a bus or a train, there I was in a house in Woodbridge, and I was stuck in the middle of this large development of houses. We started seeing these stories in the newspaper about this new town, Reston, Virginia.
We knew we had to come to Washington. I didn't want to come back. I grew up here. Everybody in my neighborhood was all the same. The houses were all the same. And then we read in Newsweek about Reston, and we said, if we're coming to Washington, that's where we're coming.
Everybody I knew said, why are you moving to Virginia? Aren't you far enough south in D.C.?
Growing up in D.C. as I did, I never went across the bridge. Wasn't a good idea. You could get hurt.
Reston felt different. It was that bucolic, safe, wonderful place. It was totally integrated.
I actually gave up a house and moved into an apartment to come to Reston. We moved, I unpacked, and I could walk down to Lake Ann, and the kids would play. It was a place to go and meet other people. There's a wonderful spirit. Wonderful.
It seemed part of my responsibility was to work on social programs that would make life more rewarding, more bearable.
The very first item that he mentioned, he said, something needs to be done about the woman problem. And I said, well, what is that? He said, women have to do too much at home. And he said, they need to be freer. And so I want a full system of daycare. His dream of Reston had been fully realized the day that opened. And we had a meeting once a week to make sure that the cultural and artistic side of Reston was not neglected.
There was always something happening on the plaza. The choral group, the players, the dancers. I didn't sleep a lot when I first moved here because it was just, I might miss seeing something.
I couldn't play tennis when I first came here. I could not play tennis. I am a self-taught tennis player. That was the beginning of utopia for me. And being allowed to play tennis and being able to afford to play tennis, that has been a huge part of my life.
We were making social breakthroughs, architectural breakthroughs, and we were talking about a new way of living. And those were things that only appealed to people that got it.
We got liberal, European-oriented people, and not at all. The locals didn't walk into the place. They thought it was crazy.
For very traditional Northern Virginia, Reston was a place that was kind of strange, really, really urban, really, really contemporary.
The houses were not selling as fast as they had hoped. They kept on saying, nobody wants attached houses. They all want detached houses with little gardens and picket fences.
The biggest obstacle of all that we had to overcome was people just thought we were the end of nowhere. It was just too far out, and it didn't make any sense to live there because of the commutes of getting anywhere.
Bob usually went to New York on the weekend. He came on Monday morning, and the first thing he wanted to see was the report from the sales department, how many houses had been sold. It began to get worse and worse and worse, almost came to a standstill at times.
At one point in '67, Gulf sent a consultant in because they'd been in it for a couple of years and were not getting any return at all.
Bob Ryan was a hired gun. He had a very good long history of troubleshooting and getting things going, making things happen.
He is the reason that Gulf decided to stay in the deal, because the Gulf Board of Directors had voted right down the middle to walk.
His job was to pick it up and at least get something going. Did he step on some toes? You betcha he stepped on toes. We had all these guys in suits coming in, looking at every aspect of what we were doing. Bob was hanging on, trying to put things back together.
Bob called me into his office and said Gulf had reached a point that in order to put in any more money, they insisted on taking over management of the project. And that as much as he hated to do it, there was no alternative. He either had to sell it off in pieces and forget about the Reston concept, or go along with it and hope that they would continue the concept that he had.
We had our first meeting. When the meeting was over, my friend took me aside and said, "Hey, Bob, you're going to have to resign. This is not going to work." It was obvious it was not going to work. But I said, "No, I'm not going to resign. You got to fire me." He said, "Okay, you're fired." I am thankful for this opportunity to communicate with you, the citizens of Reston. I profoundly regret that my connection with the future development of Reston has been severed. It is my hope that you will discover ways to make your lives richer, which will in turn serve as inspiration for many other communities of men.
When the community found out about it, all hell broke loose.
At first I thought, how could they fire him? I mean, he is Reston.
The citizenry, and the press in particular, just were in a panic.
Gulf, they weren't here to be in a charitable institution. They were in here to make money and get out. It's a whole different strategy. He was in here to complete his vision of the urban village type of situation. But they had the money.
Had they not stepped in with hundreds of millions of dollars, not millions of dollars, hundreds of millions of dollars, Reston would not be there today.
Bob Ryan fed into computer the question, how would you develop the 7,400 acres to make the most money? And it came out almost with a master plan.
He understood what Reston was trying to be and meant to be, and he agreed with that.
What our whole plan was, don't mess with the master plan, don't destroy the green space, but put new product in the spots that are already planted.
It was different, but it was good. We saw it as something happening that needed to happen. We got to get some sales here. We got to build some products that people want.
We built several thousand apartments, and those we offered people their first year's rent toward their down payment if they wanted to buy. We had our own mortgage company, built lots of inexpensive townhouses all over Reston.
When I started working on the project, what they wanted to accomplish was to demystify Reston. People thought of it as an idea, as an experiment, as something that was for other people and not for them.
Today, a new family is moving into a neighborhood of beautiful homes, golf courses, tennis courts, and over 400 acres of lakes, parks, and open space. A suburban neighborhood that Ladies' Home Journal has called the best in Washington. If your family is looking for a nice place to live, this place probably sounds like heaven. It's not. It's Reston.
The goal was set in 1969 to move in 1,000 families, and we actually moved in 1,150 families, and that was the turning point. We never got below that number moving forward.
One of the complaints we began to hear from the residents was they had read all of these materials about what a great place it was, and they had come here with very high hopes, and yet they were still having marriage difficulties. Their children were not necessarily getting great grades in school. What were we trying to tell them? And we realized that we had built pretty high expectations.
The village centers are a good example of where we made a market change. There is no question of the beauty of Lake Anne. In terms of a viable commercial property, it was always difficult. So the gathering place concept is important, but in all cases, we need them to also function as places where people work and shop, where the numbers don't work.
Some people in Reston, particularly the early pioneers, are concerned because the last shopping center, instead of being primarily pedestrian-oriented, is oriented to the motor vehicle.
With Bob no longer in charge of the development, the citizens wanted to make sure that the vision continued to progress the way he had conceived it. The citizens came together to form the Reston Citizens Association to be a watchdog on the new developer.
They've set up their own forum whereby they can express their opinions about what's being developed. I tell the developers when they come to me with a plan of development, you go out there and meet with the citizens and discuss it with them and get input from the citizens, and then come back and see me.
One of the initiatives was to organize a housing conference.
Gulf Reston was concerned that incorporating low moderate income housing would make the community less desirable. The input from this group was that the community needed housing that would support a diversity of incomes, otherwise you really couldn't fulfill the dream.
It was important to the community that anyone can live here. We are not limited by income. You'll find a place to live here in Reston. So that caused us to want to deal with affordable housing. Cedar Ridge was one. The other thing we did was build some very affordable condominium apartments.
Because it was brand new, you could participate and you knew you could make a difference.
We were all kind of in it together trying to make this a great place to live.
We're able to get a commuter bus system going on our own.
The Reston commuter bus system started with a single bus in 1968 and is now carrying more than 1,000 passengers a day. The system is managed by the riders themselves. Usually in the front of the bus, there are people who want to sleep or read, and in the back of the bus, we usually have a club section in which people sort of enjoy themselves a little bit more.
When we used to have the Black Focus Festival, there was no other major metropolitan area on the East Coast where you would find that scale of an interracial celebration of culture and heritage.
Reston Interfaith was devoted to getting affordable housing into Reston, to make Reston live up to its ideal of having housing for everybody.
NIMBY, as you know, means not in my backyard, but IMBY means in my backyard.
Reston begged the county to build a homeless shelter in its soon-to-be town center.
There was just a tremendous amount of support from within the community for that.
It really was Bob's idea about how community should work. That was the whole idea of weaving the social fabric early on, and certainly it's there.
I think I first met Bob Simon when I was RCA president. We were putting together Reston's 25th anniversary big gala festival, and he came for that. In the next few minutes, you'll be meeting Reston's founder, Robert Simon. At that point, seeing Bob Simon was not something that happened very often. And everybody wants to talk to him. He's very sociable and loves to talk to people.
Do you ever walk to Lake Ann Village Center and shop like that?
That's the way we do our shopping.
There were many, many people who wanted to continue having a relationship with him, who valued his opinions and valued what he thought about things. He really didn't have the authority at that point, but he always had an opinion.
The next time you build one of these places, let me know. We'll move.
Great.
All credit due to Gulf and Mobil, Gulf's successor, for preserving the master plan in its essence and its spirit. There have been plenty of opportunities to just forget it and go back to more traditional ways and perhaps less expensive ways of developing. But first Gulf and then now Mobil have adhered to it, and Mobil is putting in the crown jewel right now, the town center, which was there in the master plan originally.
Bob Simon had this view that at the center of this 7-village thing called a new town, there was going to someday be a downtown, something that would hold it all together and give it kind of a heart.
We knew we wanted something different. We had malls all around us, number one, but more than that, that's not what we wanted.
We used to joke that malls were prisons for women. I mean, they were just so unadorned and blank walls, and all they needed was a barbed wire fence.
Maybe because of the lofty goals that Bob Simon set early on, everyone felt, well, you know, we can't just do what's sort of expected. You know, we should reach for something more.
In the Reston Town Center, a streetscape will be defining the space and bringing an urban form to a suburban setting.
It was considered crazy to go to this couple hundred acres of suburban woods and build a grid of streets. And people say, well, if you were doing this in downtown DC or Boston or something, of course. Reston, like out there in the burbs, you either built an office park, or you built a shopping mall, or you built a residential subdivision. And I used to tell them we're building a street.
Reston Town Center was a big risk and a big, bold venture, and there were a lot of skeptics.
there was a real question whether it would work or not. And we were dealing with a new concept, and it wasn't at that time initially a viable office market out there. It just wasn't there.
I remember having several times said, oh my God, what if they don't buy this?
On behalf of Mobile, it is my pleasure to welcome you to our newest and perhaps most elegant venture, Reston Town Center.
With today's unveiling, we salute another milepost that was part of Bob Simon's dream, the creation of a dynamic urban marketplace that will be a pace setter for America's new downtowns, but one that harkens back to the marketplaces of an earlier time.
First and foremost, we were a town center. And town center meant it had to be the center of town for all of Reston, a central gathering place.
This is a place where people will come even if they're not spending a nickel. We want people to come just to be here. If we can create that kind of place, then the commercial objectives will have been served.
You couldn't have a better plaza than Fountain Square. It is a wonderful gathering place.
Bob Simon, his basic positioning of Reston was you would be combining the vitality and energy of a downtown with the serenity of a natural setting. And that combination, I think, is part of the Reston promise from the very beginning.
When you pull into this community, you just can't help but be drawn in by the green and the trees and the large amount of open space that we're blessed with here. It's a calming place to be. I think it's the kind of place that people want to come home to. Kids still run around in the forest here and really learn about nature. It's just so important to teach them so they can develop that inner love for nature.
I like to say, you know, in Reston, you can walk out your back door and be in a national park. You can walk out your front door and be on Main Street. I think that combination of city and country, when you can weave it together as gracefully as it's been done in Reston, you've really created something special.
Bob had been living on Long Island, and it had been very lonely for him. He had to get in the car to go to do anything, to visit friends, and that's a piece of what he wanted to avoid when he created Reston.
I only can imagine what a difficult period that was for him. And it certainly was for our family. He and my mom were divorced.
He was trying to decide whether or not to move to Reston. He didn't know if the community would think it was appropriate or not. And I said, come back, come back. We really would love to have you here.
He had other properties and he had consulting gigs, but nothing inspired the passion in him that Reston had inspired. This is his magnum opus.
Well, I guess 6.5 mornings out of 7, I get out of bed, and it's very difficult. I head for the Van Gogh Bridge, then up to the Van Gogh Bridge, and my first stop for a minute. It's been such a long haul, I have to take a breath or two. Good morning. The idea of coming here where I could walk and be among friends was very appealing. So that's what I did 20 years ago. I came back here. The welcome was quiet as it should have been. When I came back, it wasn't very long before I got in the elevator one day from the 15th floor apartment with walking shoes on, and a lady got on board the elevator with walking shoes on, and I said, and I quote, "Are you going for a walk?" And she said, and I quote, "Yes." And the rest is history.
I think when he returned here, there might have been a question in his mind about how he would be received.
Hi.
How are you?
Healthy. How about you?
Healthy as well. Thank you very much.
All three?
All three, yes.
I think that Bob probably hoped that people would appreciate Reston and be appreciative of what's here that they enjoy.
Did Reston turn out the way you thought it would?
Terrific question. Would you like to have good first or bad first?
Good first.
Good first? I'll do it, but I prefer the other. However, I like to end on a happy note, but I'll do it your way.
He enjoys people and engages people, and he has the community he wanted.
What will you do for your next birthday?
Whoa, well, undoubtedly eat some cake. I'll be 99 then.
I want to see if you can get to 100.
I want to see if I can, too.
His heart is still so deep in this town. And he cares so much about how things turn out.
My name is Carla. I just wanted to say thank you so much for finding this
Well, you're more than welcome.
place to live.
I've never lived in a community like this.
It was just the perfect time for us to start the conversation with him again.
We need to redevelop large parts of Reston. It's 50 years old, parts of it. We're going to have big challenges. We need to keep reminding people about what Reston is.
Somebody count.
Yeah, who's counting?
Good morning and welcome to Metro, the Silver Line.
This really is something special. The biggest and largest and most complicated infrastructure project in the United States of America.
The Metro is a key moment for Reston. Reston was going in all the right directions, but there wasn't enough of a critical mass to go far enough. Having the Metro there will create a great economic incentive to become more built up and more dense.
You know, Bob Simon here in Reston had a vision that there would be 7 villages. And he built 5, or there were 5 built. The change that should come to the community is that the transit stations are going to function a lot like villages.
The program with the mixed use, with residential, transient use, with hotel use, all organized around a central plaza, is a very good model for what can become an urban space which is very active. I think what is just as important as the buildings is the space in between those buildings, where people gather and congregate, where there's a certain sense of place.
You know, I'm kind of a Johnny-come-lately to Reston. I moved here serendipitously just because it was close to work. Hi, how you doing? I think town center is the new dynamic, the kind of new urbanism that I think is going to be very attractive to millennials. I'm absolutely bullish about Reston's future. I think it will change, but it's going to change in really powerful and good ways. I think it's going to change in ways that are going to make people want to be here even more. I really think we're going to become an even more dynamic place and a true destination. But there's going to be a pivot, too, in terms of our mentality, that this isn't going to be the old Reston. It's going to be a new Reston. It will be a different Reston.
Robert E. Simon, good morning.
Good morning.
What are you thinking these days about Reston's past, present, future? What's on your mind about Reston?
Well, I must say I've learned how to say future. You say future. We expect another 40,000 people to move into Reston. The challenge is going to be to continue the sense of community that I believe exists among the 60,000 people who live there.
One of the challenges we have is that as Reston and all of its success continues to change, usually the things that are rebuilt are expensive. When rail comes, housing values go up. It's good to have rail. It's good for housing values to go up, but it also puts some people at risk of not being able to stay in their community. So much of our affordable housing is going away and has been going away.
Fortunately, I was able to purchase our house 12 years ago.
Come on. Come on, Fluffy.
I couldn't afford this house now if I was to be buying it today. There's no way.
This is where we first met as little kids. Because this was where my brother and her brother played football. Her dad was the coach. She was the cheerleader. And I was the tag-along little brother.
I had such a great childhood growing up in Reston. It was a place I wanted my children to grow up. Schools are great. I think the community is great, and I wanted my children to experience that.
I've lived in Reston since I was 2 months old. My mom and dad moved here in 1967. Now I've been here my whole life. I moved on my own when I was 22 and rented an apartment with a roommate, and I was able to do that. When our kids grow up, I don't think they'll, afford to do that. I don't think they'll have that opportunity.
Finished any more for your list of books you've read this summer? You have to add them to the list, to your sheet. Okay? But once you fill out the name, bring it back to me.
I work at Laurel Learning Center. It's been around for a long time, serves a lot of lower income families. Bob Simon, he's come by a few times. And then from our kids doing the Reston Triathlon, he always shows up there, so they all know who he is. A lot of them starting out didn't even know what a triathlon was. A lot of the training is rigorous. It was a challenge for them. For some of them, I think it's probably the most challenging thing that they've ever done.
Show them, Joseph. Look straight ahead. Good.
If you try your hardest and not just go, oh, I can't do it, and think you can do it, put your mind to it, then you can accomplish anything. And that's what Mr. Brent taught us.
Take those goggles off.
97.
There you go.
All right, I'm going to turn the microphone over to Reston's founder, Robert Simon.
this knocks me out. See all of you kids here. Now I'm going to say the fateful words. Are you ready? On your mark, get set, go!
This is what I like about Reston. This is how I want my kids to grow up. You have every financial class, race, color, creed. I specifically want my kids to be here for that exact reason.
Push, push. Look, right there. See how fast you can go.
Reston has always been so open. Robert E. Simon's plan was to offer the experience of Reston to anybody and everybody.
Hey, Bob. Hey.
Can I get a picture of you and the kids?
Congratulations, kid.
It is a very important idea for Bob to have housing for all strata of society.
Well, congratulations.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for coming.
A great race.
For financial, economic reasons, but also because it creates a richer mix, a richer society.
Crescent was one of the most affordable places when you first came to Reston. There are 9 acres out there. That acreage allows us for redevelopment. Bob talked about affordable housing, talked about diversity of housing. Those are going to be the critical elements that you will look at and say, does this look like what is truly a Reston redevelopment? We have families that have come to live in Crescent. They have their kids in great schools. They have their opportunities for their family to work close by. And so they want to make sure that they can stay there.
When I came to Crescent, I became part of the Lake and Plaza Village. I felt I am a part of everybody. And my daughters are doing great here. They became Restonians. This is something that a great visionary create for people like me, for people like my neighbors.
We believe that development is necessary for Reston, and we believe that a rising tide should lift all boats. We are here to make sure that Reston includes all religions, all races, and especially all classes of people in our society.
There's a tradition here, there's a history here about which I think people are justifiably proud. You know, Reston being one of the first, maybe the first, open community in Northern Virginia. That history has developed something really special. I think all of us that are newer to the community owe it to those people to make sure that we do a good job as the new stewards of bringing that history forward. And I think fundamentally that gets back to Bob Simon's founding principles.
All right, we next have a public hearing on the proposed redevelopment of the Crescent apartment site in the Hunter Mill district.
Well, this project, from my point of view, is the answer to a dream. The reason why I'm really excited is because we have a developer who is not only interested in his bottom line, but he's also concerned. He's concerned with all of you. You do not have to be, you do not. He not only is going to provide as much affordable housing as there is now, but an increased amount and more than is required under county regulations. So I want to thank you very much.
Thank you, Bob.
I cannot express how important this action is today and going forward. I moved to Reston in 1969, and shortly after I moved, the community of Reston contacted Fairfax County and said, the vision of Reston says that it is a community of multiple types of people who help each other and bring the diversity and the wealth of talent and sharing that's needed for people to live as community. And thus was created the first public housing place that came into Reston. And I say that and take the time to say it because there has been angst about what we will do. And I want you to know that my commitment has always been fulfilling those things that we've been taught so well by Bob Simon, our founder, and those who have picked up the leadership role in the community to carry those principles forward.
This is the key of my home, and it says, "We are glad you are here." And today I feel that I can be in Reston time.
When you hear your country of nationality, please stand. Afghanistan, Bangladesh, Bhutan, Canada, Chile, People's Republic of China, Colombia, that I will support and defend Costa Rica, the Constitution and laws, El Salvador, of the United States of America, Ethiopia, so help me God. Congratulations, you're America's newest citizen.
The man was a visionary. That's been proven. It may not be the perfect vision that he had, but I'll guarantee 85 to 95% of it's there. We may not have strolling ministers and gondolas going down the damn street, but it's there, right?
Bob Simon was doing something extraordinary, which is he was saying, I want to build a community that will stand for the right things, do the right things, be the right kind of place, because I want to show that it can be done. I think suburban development now has finally learned its lesson, so to speak. When somebody does it right, it isn't radical and strange the way Reston looked radical and strange when it was done.
We're seeing more attention to open spaces, particularly civic open spaces. We're seeing more mixed use and street life. We're seeing stores that are opening their doors onto the street. We're seeing a variety of household types, different age types, different product types, together in one place.
I think that you have to really look at what Reston is as an archetype of where we want to go.
I'm optimistic about the future. I don't think Reston is going to stop being a special place. I think people still think they've got something here and they want it to stay that way. Community is what it's all about.